Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Habits You Love. I am thrilled to finally have our on-staff therapist back in action today. We were chatting and we have been doing an attachment style series, and life gets in the way, and somehow we have let about 7 months go by until we have finished the four of the four attachment styles. So here we are. So it's taken us about a whole year to wrap up this attachment style, but hey, you know what? Life gets in the way. It's all right. I'm actually going to probably re-release each episode. So back to back to back so people can listen to all of them in a row. But let's just get a quick life update from Miss Morgan, now Winder, right? Or McNeill.
McNeill, I know
Okay.
I'm still getting used to it. I think that I'm not sure if you went through this, but something I feel like people don't share as much with the marriage process is the really difficult, long process of changing your last name.
Yes.
I feel like it's just glorified of like, okay, change it on Instagram and it's easy, and it really is not. And so still a year and some
Have you
months.
officially changed it?
So legally it is changed, but some
Okay.
some things aren't changed and some aren't. So it's getting a little disorienting and confusing, I think, for all, because just with the board and some business stuff, it takes a little bit longer. And a lot of procrastination coming up. So I've just been dragging my feet. So I joke around that it feels like I have two identities, truly.
Honestly, I am in the thick of that right now. I immediately changed it on social media and I'm like, it's it's official. Everything that auto populates on my phone, on my computer, is like still Fazio, my emails. I haven't officially legally even done it, just because I know that's a process. And it's just really not fair that women have to do this. Honestly, we do so much. Why do we have to be the one to change our name?
1,000%. And also something I wasn't anticipating. And I have felt grateful with sharing this with a few people that they have absolutely felt the same way. But there is this like unexpected grief process of changing your last name and like embodying, as exciting as it is, but this new identity and people calling you by a different last name. It just is a weird process where it's not all excitement, at least that I had found. Like it was definitely difficult to be like, oh, okay, like I'm changing my name. And so I think that's an interesting element that isn't frequently talked about out loud.
Absolutely. I 1000% agree. But I will say, I think one of the main things that has been hard for me is, since I know you like had a full on blown out wedding in Mexico, it was planned, it was like anticipated. And then I think because since our plans just got derailed from the hurricane and we ended up having to elope, it just hasn't hit me, or never hit me, that I got married, basically, because it
Yeah.
it wasn't this like big celebration and no one was there, and it wasn't, it's kind of this thing that you build up and you hype up, and then when it's over, you're like, oh my gosh, like we did it. And then this was like,
Yeah.
okay, we're married. So there's this weird energy with
Absolutely.
me where I'm like, I kind of forget that we are married. Honestly, it's
Absolutely. I agree too. And I think even if there is a big wedding or like just an elopement too, I think when your relationship, like afterwards, maybe nothing, like not too much changes, where I feel like previously a very traditional model of, okay, waiting to do certain things as far as like moving in or big steps of like purchasing a home. And those really kind of intensify or solidify that feeling, where JJ and I have been together for like 8 years and got married, and we're like, yeah, it's still
yeah.
the same thing.
Yep. Even when Tyler calls me his wife, I'm like, oh yeah, we're married.
We're
So, but
both going
the
through an
same. I'm
identity
just like, I
crisis.
just have
Yeah.
always felt like we're going to be together forever. So it was never this, okay, we're officially over that phase. It just blended right in. So I 100% agree. So your name says Winder. And then I was like, oh, wait, no, it's not Winder. That's her old name. So Morgan McNeill officially. So how is the first, not quite a year, right, of marriage, but how has this the first year been?
Yeah, it's been honestly great. I I think with dating for so long, I feel like we've gotten through so many like previous hurdles that it feels like married life kind of feels the same in a great way. It feels it's been calm, it's been exciting. Yeah, it's been really nice. I will say it feels like a little bit of a shift, especially since we're talking about attachment styles, of a little bit more of this like safety and security that I think we were excited to have in the sense of when dating, of talking about engagements or what's next for us. I think it kind of feels really peaceful to be in a place where it's like, yeah, this is something we've always wanted, just wasn't sure of timing and with so many other things going on in our life. So I think it feels peaceful. It
Secured,
feels,
like secured, basically. It's
yes, very on
sealed.
theme for today. Yeah. Yeah, so it's honestly been great. I feel like just a lot of life transitional things with changing practices the past year. And I think now that we've prioritized the wedding and honeymoon and some things, I think we're in a space where we're just very focused on our careers, which is a great place to be in right now.
Awesome. Oh, so good to see you. Like I said, we've just been holding off. We've been really leaving people on a cliffhanger for this last episode. I was it's like it's like Yellowstone waiting a whole year to release a new season. Well, we're just leaving people hanging, but here we are.
Absolutely. I'm
So
so happy
yeah.
to be here.
Yeah. So, all right. So, we're just going to wrap up the series again with the last one, secure attachment. So, we've done 3 episodes, which I'm going to link in the show notes, but probably re release them as well with all the attachment styles. So, that includes anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment. And now we're finishing with the gold standard of attachments, secure
Mhm.
attachment. So, quickly, if you want to go over just the other attachment styles, just a brief one maybe of each one and kind of their definitions, if you have that. And then we'll talk about the definition of secure attachment and how we can find our way into secure attachment and why it's so.
Absolutely. The 3 insecure attachment styles are all insecure based on those like deep attachment wounds that happen in childhood that we know about. And so each 3 of them present differently. And so the avoidant, this one's really interesting because from the outside, these are really self-efficient, really, it presents as high self-esteem. These are our independent, I don't really need anybody, I've got it individuals who, again, everyone should put a hand in the air if this applies to you. But these individuals, I think, especially from their peers, but even from their parents, are really highly praised for having these patterns. But what we know is underneath that kind of exterior layer, these are individuals who are insecure in the sense of having a really low tolerance for emotional and physical intimacy, in the sense of how close they can feel to their partners in relationships. So fully capable of having relationships, but once conflict comes up, emotional closeness, maybe their partner has emotional needs, that's really where we'll see that avoidant pattern come up, whether they're dismissive towards their partner or it really just feels so uncomfortable to get close and to stay close. And so they withdraw. From there, we have our anxious attachment, and these individuals, their insecure attachment wounds comes from a deep, deep fear of being rejected or abandoned. And so completely opposite of the avoidant, these individuals love to move close and to feel really close to their partner with that fear that they will abandon them. And so they have the opposite of avoidant. They have a really big emotional threshold, and almost to a fault, where that can maybe overwhelm their partner or overwhelm their peers, just because, again, that need to feel so close due to not wanting to lose that partner. Then we have last, as far as the insecure, of the disorganized attachment style. And that is going to be kind of the best way I like to think of it, is like a blend of the avoidant and anxious. And so this can really create some inconsistent patterns, not trusting others because their attachment wound is their biggest source of safety growing up, was also their biggest source of fear. And so a lot of times they do like to move close to a relationship, but once they do, it feels so scary and fearful. So they back away. So they really blend in both of those avoidant and anxious patterns, which hence the name creates a really disorganized approach to the relationship.
Those are amazing descriptions. No wonder you're my on-staff therapist because you're just amazing. And thank you for that. If you aren't watching this and listening, I was totally raising my hand to the avoidant attachment because that's how was working on. I don't know exactly where I stand with it. It's a constant work in progress. We've talked about how you can dip in and out of, okay, I'm really secure. And then maybe something new comes along and you kind of teeter back down to that attachment style that you were in. And so it's a constant back and forth. Sometimes I feel very secure with Tyler. Other times I can feel that avoidant attachment creeping back in. So it's not always like you reach the destination of secure attachment and you don't have to do any more work. Sometimes it's a constant work in progress, especially with different dynamics of whether it's a friendship, a relationship, a work environment, something, and just a new environment where you have to be aware of your behaviors and patterns in those environments.
Absolutely. So well said. It is a constant work in progress. I think oftentimes, especially when I give the psycho ed of attachment styles in sessions, I try to make it so clear of like when we work towards a secure attachment, it's not like this door just unlocks and you're in that new door and you're there forever of just, okay, you're securely attached now and the work is done. People really do, as we know in peer relationships, work relationships, romantic relationships, family members, they activate and trigger different wounds. And so we can be around a friend who makes us feel so secure and then be with a romantic partner that maybe activates a completely different attachment wounds and brings out parts to us that it does feel shocking because maybe that wasn't present there for a while. And that's something that we'll get into a little bit as well, that I wanted to talk about is that with being in a secure relationship, it really is just, it is that constant work and getting to that point is also noticing like who am I attracted to, because we're often sometimes not attracted to the secure person. So that's kind of the work in itself as well.
Yeah. Two things that came to me is when you said like a friendship could be super secure. And if you're thinking, well, I've had a best friend for 20 years, but I've seen five different men come and go, it's probably because you're very secure in that relationship and you might know everything about each other and you feel secure
Mm.
enough to open up to them emotionally, whatever. And then a stranger comes in and it has to, you have to completely kind of start over with this secure and trust with someone. And so that just reminded me of like, I've had a friend for 25 years and that feels like very secure. But then the dating scene is like, all right, here comes my test to my attachment style.
Absolutely. That is something I explain to clients. I try to highlight their capability of having a secure attachment with me. And I'll often ask them,
Mhm.
like, does this feel like a secure attachment? Do you feel comfortable opening up? Your emotional threshold is different. You respect boundaries. This is a secure relationship in itself. How is that different than maybe this new romantic relationship in your life? And it's exactly what you're saying of like, well, they're new. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, do they have the emotional capability to meet
Yeah.
me where I'm at? Are they going to hold this information in a safe way and not dismiss it? And so it really shows that we are capable of it, but people who are new or people who are not sure of, it definitely triggers those attachment wounds.
Yeah. And then you said you obviously aren't always attracted to a secure person, but isn't it kind of true that we mainly attract an attachment style completely opposite of us?
Typically, that feels
Yeah.
so true for the
Yeah.
avoidant, anxious. An anxious attachment typically loves an avoidant because it really reinforces some of those wounds that they had growing up. And it just is some very familiar framework. And interestingly enough, the avoidant really does lean towards an anxious just because they exhibit like almost like just a complete opposite of they do have this emotional threshold, but it creates this really tough dance because they just trigger each other so
Yeah.
much. The anxious gets closer, the avoidant pulls away, and the anxious kind of likes that and moves closer. And so,
Yes. Like a game
the
of cat and mouse, the chase.
absolutely. And I think again, part of like getting to that secure attachment is really identifying and being so familiar with the attachment styles, not only for yourself, but really being able to identify who are the people I'm typically most attracted to. What are they exhibiting in their attachment wounds? What are difficulties that they might have? And kind of really being familiar of, am I even attracted towards a secure
Yeah.
individual.
So before we get into why you even need to know your attachment style, because I really want to, again, bring people to this place of, okay, I never have even noticed my attachment style, or I've never thought about an attachment style. So that kind of starts that work of accepting where you are, now acknowledging what role you have to play in it, and then that constant awareness to figure out what you are. But let me quickly just kind of go over what the secure attachment style looks like, because this is
Mhm.
what we all need to try to be striving to work towards, to have healthy relationships in any capacity, friendships especially. When I hear people just have like very rocky friendships or dramatic friendships, or they're
Mhm.
like in and out and they're constantly changing friends over and over and there's tons of turnover, that's just a red flag. So we need to be able to have steady, good friendships. And maybe they don't have to last forever, but not burning bridges or creating again that dramatic scene. So the work we have to do is to constantly get back to that secure attachment, which is a healthy attachment style. This is characterized by trust, emotional safety, and the ability to form close, stable relationships. So people with this attachment feel comfortable with intimacy and independence, communicate their needs effectively, and navigate conflicts with confidence. They tend to have a positive view of themselves and others, which is super important, allowing them to build strong, supportive relationships in both personal and professional settings. As we have talked about in previous episodes, attachment styles develop in childhood, which is kind of crazy to think about. So
Mhm.
through in childhood through consistent responsive caregiving, but can also be cultivated later in life through self-awareness and intentional effort. So that is a definition of both secure and just attachment styles in general. And so again, like I said before, the work is to be like, okay, let's get curious here. Like, what attachment style am I? So if you don't know, you might want to go back and listen to those other episodes that we put out. But let's just get into a couple of questions. What does a secure attachment look like in daily life and in relationships, do you think?
Yeah, secure attachment is, I often want to say, like, I feel like it is so glorified in the attachment world that I just don't want it to get confused with like perfection,
Yeah.
right? Of like securely attached individuals are often still having their own triggers in relationships and things that are getting them upset. And it is not like secure relationships between two romantic partners is this beautiful, perfect, smooth sailing relationship. And so I always just like to be careful with that, that it's not this thing that feels unachievable, doesn't feel realistic, doesn't feel relatable at all. It totally is. It's just more of when these things come up in romantic relationships, how are two securely attached individuals handling those things and how do they operate separately? And really secure individuals are so secure in themselves and they're able to bring that to the relationship where they have high self esteem. They're really comfortable being alone with themselves. But the key part of that is also being able to emotionally show up for their partner. And so, not to be confused with avoidant, they're totally okay with being on their own, right? But that secure difference is we're okay with being on our own and having boundaries, which can be tough for the anxious. But we also can lean in and emotionally attune and soothe our partners while also soothing our own emotions. So, kind of how we're handling conflict as well. We are trusting our partners. There isn't any mistrust. And that's okay if there is any type of ruptured trust in a relationship. Again, that secure attachment is going to be able to communicate in a way to get back to a good place to heal those trust wounds, if you will, can communicate your needs effectively. And so, a good example of this is if there is conflict in the relationship, maybe someone who is anxious is maybe not letting the argument go or cannot even express their needs in a healthy way. Maybe an avoidant is dismissing or just avoiding the problem at all and kind of not even acknowledging the problem, rather than two securely attached people are going to be able to calmly communicate those needs, trusting and knowing that their partner can hold that space for them. They can hear the needs, not get offended, really regulate their own emotions and not put that on their partner to regulate their own. And so the communication, I think, especially just looks a lot different. These also, such a good part of secure relationship is that there is this capacity to reflect how you're being in the relationship too. This emotional maturity to really take accountability, have self awareness, self reflect, have all of these elements that help you strive to be the best partner. Where again, I think in these insecure types of attachments, if we are insecure on our own, it is so hard to show up and self reflect and take accountability and really put a mirror up to us and understand how we're affecting the relationship. So I hope that paints a good picture of like what the differences are from an insecure, if even with conflict, to what a secure relationship would typically look like.
Yeah, I mean, that just sounds like so good, like to have all of that. That just sounds like
Yeah.
no drama, just the ability to move past them as opposed to sweeping them under the rug and avoiding them, or on the opposite, like making them such a bigger deal than they have to be. Personally, what was coming to mind was I am definitely more on the avoidance side. Tyler's more on the anxious side. Obviously, we attracted each other.
Yeah.
And I feel like for a long time we both weren't, we were kind of in the middle of this, like we're not so secure, but we're not insecure. Like we don't
Mm.
fight, quote unquote. We don't fight, but we also don't really grow and have these like difficult conversations. So it was kind of just like we're just right there in the middle, not really one or the other. But recently in the last couple of months, I've just felt this shift and I want to be more like emotionally there for him and like what he needs. I felt like for a long time we weren't meeting each other's emotional needs of what we really needed as in a relationship. I mean, there was like the fun and like we're not harming each other, but we're not really like going above and beyond for each other. So just recently we've
Mhm.
been dabbling in some couples therapy of just how to better work through communication and meeting each other's needs. And there was just so many times where, of course, I want to avoid conflict and he wants to like, we need to talk about this right now. And I'm like, no, I
Yeah.
need 5 days. I need 5 days to talk about this. So then our communication was just not going great for a little bit. And so I just needed a therapist to come in and be like,
Yeah.
the mediator for us, that no, Tyler, this is what Kayla is saying. No, Kayla, this is what Tyler is saying. And just be able to move past that. So just all that to say, sometimes it does take just a little bit more work. Even if you're in a relationship where you're like, well, we have no drama, we don't fight, we're fine, but it doesn't feel like this like very strong, secure either, where the ability to grow and communicate and handle conflict at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of a topic I wanted to bring up when thinking about going and moving into secure attachment. So, like, you've identified your attachment style, you know what that looks like, and you're working towards moving to secure. There's a term, I first heard it with a book, Wired for Love, that I recommend. And he talks about what it means to be secure enough.
Mhm.
And I heard like a couple therapists using that term, and I was like, I love that because again, I think like sometimes secure can feel like this really daunting task of like, am I secure to even start dating? Did I get to a good enough spot to find a safe partner? Where I love the term secure enough, and it feels like that's what you were describing is
Mhm.
we're not noticing these huge wounds activated all of the time with like a lot of charge and intensity, but we feel safe enough to enter couples together, to really start moving towards a really great direction that feels comfortable for both of us and to like widen this emotional capacity, which is beautiful. And I think that highlights secure enough. Like we are secure enough to recognize this, to see these patterns, to want to work towards it. And I think that's so relatable too, of going back to things don't have to be perfect and it's not going to look like that all the time. But such a secure element is two people recognizing their role of like, okay, we know that this is each of our attachment style. This is how we typically would handle it. How do we want to handle it differently? And if you can get to that place, that is so transformative to still show up and see each other and respect each other's individuality, but then want to work together to strengthen it
Yes.
more.
I totally forgot about that term. And when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. And that's kind of, I feel like that's exactly what I was describing. It's almost like it's like a tipping point. It's like you're on the edge of this cliff and you're like, well, we could be fine here, but we feel we could like go all in and go more and kind of this tipping
Yeah.
point of wanting to be even more secure with each other and have that just ultimate bond and connection that it takes a lot of work to get to. I mean, I do feel like Tyler and I are soulmates, but I also feel like we could have, I've told him, I was like, I feel like we could just be a little bit more deeply connected. So just active
Absolutely.
work towards that. So for someone who doesn't have a secure attachment style, what are some common behaviors or thought patterns that indicate they're operating from an insecure place, from any of those other three insecure attachment styles? And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this part.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I think I always really recommend starting in the place to notice your behaviors of taking the attachment project quiz.
Yes.
It is so, so helpful and really makes you dive deep and reflect on a deeper level. And I think the quiz in itself highlights a lot of themes of how do I handle opening up to even friends, opening up to others, opening up to my parents. And I think that highlights a lot of themes that are helpful for you to notice. But a lot of common behaviors and thought patterns are, I believe, emotional regulation. And so typically, for an example, an avoidant, when things get emotionally close, or maybe that person wants to move to a deeper stage, wants more in the relationship, they're going to notice that dysregulation and that, like, I do not feel safe.
Mhm.
And I think that's the common theme. It's just how does your emotional regulation come up when you don't feel safe in these relationships? Because for an insecure attachment, that's going to come up. It's just what triggers it. And so for an anxious, if someone is pulling away, they're going to notice that dysregulation coming up of like, I don't feel safe. It does not feel okay. I feel like I'm being abandoned. And I think like furthermore, if someone's doing work with a therapist or even if they want to explore this more, there's typically like a common belief that comes up of a negative self-belief or just a belief in general of when they do feel triggered in those relationships. And so for a disorganized, that might be like, I can't trust anybody. For an avoidant, that might be like, I need space. I don't feel in control. This is all too much, like a lot of overwhelm. And for, or like, I don't need anybody. Or for an anxious, it's like, I need you, I need help, I need to feel seen, I want to feel wanted. And so I think also being able to see those insecure patterns come up is something that's bound to happen. It's just what that trigger is going to be.
Mhm.
I think too of how chaotic a relationship feels is also very telling. I think one of the keywords I always use with clients is it is so great if a partner or a friend has all these great attributes to them and you guys have similar values and beliefs, but are they consistent? And I think that's something we can see across the insecure attachment patterns is maybe one day they're such a great partner and the next day it's super inconsistent and we're not seeing attunement, we're not seeing safety, we're not seeing consistency. And consistency is such a big trigger for attachment wounds. And so I think of noticing the pattern in your friendships, your family members, romantic relationships of like, how consistent do these themes feel? Do they respect my boundaries? Are they able to meet me where I'm at and provide me attunement? And so I think all of those feel so true in an insecure attachment style.
Yeah, absolutely. There should be a scale. You should right now, if you're listening, do a scale 1 to 10. How chaotic is your relationship? Go from there. Because a relationship should not be chaotic. I mean, I guess I wanted to ask you what you thought about this. If someone, when they are single and they're not dating and they seem and they act very secure and they're like so good being alone, they're confident, but then they attract these very chaotic relationships. I mean, at the end of the day, that probably just means they're insecure, right? An insecure attachment.
It could be. That's interesting that it would feel like they only attract that type of person. I'd be so curious on so many different types of questions of like,
Oh, I can tell you all the answers
okay,
because I know this person personally.
I
Because
think
like
it would
when
be
she's single, she's so good. You would think that you'd be attracting these like amazing partners, but she somehow
Mhm.
always attracts people she has to save, people that are very inconsistent, people that are hot cold. drama, anger issues. I'm like, how do you even get in this situation?
That is fascinating. If I were her therapist, I would explore of like when she is meeting these people and when she is also attracted to them, of almost when she's meeting them, like what her boundaries are like. Because it
Probably
sounds,
none.
yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds great that and I think that is so true. What is the energy that we're putting out? What are we attracting? 100% is true. But when we're in these initial meetings, or getting to know someone, I think that says so much of like what are our boundaries or how much we're engaging in that rescue behavior. And so that's something I'd be so curious about.
Yeah. I also think there could be a form of like fake secure or fake confidence, but then
Mm,
when a situation arises, it kind of displays and exposes how you really feel. So to
mm,
me, I feel like if someone is how this person is, but then they attract these things, I truly think it's a matter of how much they love and respect themselves.
1,000%.
Because I think I told her this too. It just seemed to me like she needed to attract someone who was just at a very low place in their life or needed a lot of work. Because to
Mm,
her, if she could be that person that came into their life and changed for her, then that's like the ultimate form of love that she sees as love is like, wow, this person completely changed for me. That means I am worth changing for, therefore I am worth loving. And it was like she like wanted to see them through that. It just seems like you have to save someone and that's how you receive love.
yeah, that is so interesting. And it feels so true for so many people of this rescue behavior. Somewhere along the lines, she had to rescue others and was rewarded for it and learned that that is a form of love. What you're describing does not feel like secure attachment, not in a bad way.
Yeah.
Given this case study, it feels like anxious attachment.
Yeah.
But I think that you bring up a good point of like someone can maybe be alone and present really confident, kind of this like exterior that does pull people in. We are very attracted to confident people, but when that layer kind of sheds down a little bit, I'd be curious of like what is presenting and how much those boundaries are in place or how much there's an attractive to rescuing people, and that might be a different energy that maybe she doesn't realize she is putting out.
Absolutely. We don't need to rescue anyone. We need to individually come together as our best selves and attract from that place. And one can't be 100% healthy while the other one's operating on a 10% healthy level. And then you expect them to meet you at your level. Again, you can't expect to drain your energy trying to give away everything you have to them because then you're going to run out of yours.
Absolutely. And it very well could be true too of someone who has had like previous anxious or insecure attachment, and say this individual has like worked to such a place of like feeling more secure, but that specific type of person just triggers and like re-exposes all of those
Mhm.
wounds. And so for her to be hyper aware of like, okay, these are these type of people that I love to help. I need to be super aware of like what are the red flags of that type of person and being hyper aware of
Yep.
that.
And making sure that when you are aware of them, you do something about it and not just be like, well, let these 10 things slide. Because
Yes, absolutely.
I swear, the deeper you get into something, the harder it is to get out. As long as it took you to get down into something, the harder it is going to get out of something. So just don't waste your
Yes.
time with any of that. Affecting your mental health is something you do not want to do because it's hard to already do it on your own without anything affecting your life. And then when something comes in and really affects it and you have the power to control it, let's just not even go there.
Yeah, I think this is a good mental note to add to our list of episodes we would love to do in the future of why we rescuing behavior, like what those individuals can do, because similar to people pleasing, it can feel so fulfilling. Like when we have that natural empathy and helper in us, and speaking to someone who totally gets it as a therapist, like it can be so triggering and so tough. But acknowledging that's not our role as a partner, like you highlighted and brought up, and really it's okay to put accountability on our partners for them to regulate ourselves, them to handle all of that. And that's that's not our role. That's more that inches into like a parent-child relationship or like a controller
Yes.
relationship rather than it being a healthy, mutual, secure attachment.
Absolutely. So we've talked about the three insecure attachment styles. She did reference a few things that I will put in the show notes. The quiz, what was it called again?
The Attachment Project
Attachment.
quiz, and also that website is just the best resource. I lean on that so heavily because they have really great workbooks too that have been fascinating. And so I kind of going towards like our last step of being so aware of your attachment style, but what do you, now that you have this information, where do you want to go from there?
Yeah.
Honestly, those workbooks are a pretty incredible step. I will warn, like they are difficult. Like it really makes you peel back the layers on like, what are my beliefs? Where did this stem from? Really going into what are your characteristics that align with this attachment style and what do you want to challenge? How that might present to people. And so it does a really good job of giving you a lot of psychoeducation, but the workbook also making you peel back those layers and start rewiring so you have a really, really deeper understanding of your triggers, patterns, beliefs, and just how you kind of want to move forward.
I love that. I love that constant work. And then the Wired for Love book. I know you've referenced that in the past too. So we'll
Mhm.
also put that in there. So, what are some practical steps or habits people can develop to move towards secure attachment, especially if they grew up with an insecure attachment style? And as we know, it's never too late to change that, whether you're 20, whether you're 40, 60, whatever. So, what are some practical steps people can start doing right now outside of the acknowledging, accepting the attachment style that they have, maybe doing the workbook, peeling back the layers? What are some other things?
Yeah, I think treating this almost as you would of anxiety. The first step is really being so apparent of like, what are your triggers? And
Mhm.
so I think that just forces like a lot of self awareness. And so if you're in a friendship, if you're, it's your family or even a romantic relationship, being aware of like when your partner does something or something's happening in the relationship, really somatically and physically, what are you noticing in your body? Does your body want to run and go into flight mode? Does it want to fight? Does it want to freeze? And just noticing those physical symptoms. And I think just staying really curious about that of like, what just happened? What do I need right now from my partner? What does my body want to do? And so you're really understanding, does my body want to run because it doesn't think it's safe? Does it want to freeze because it is so scared right now? What's happening? And I think really building the awareness around the triggers is the goal of one, taking your accountability for your role, right? Like that is our job in any relationship is to understand what triggers us and to work through it. But I think to understand of, is that happening because we need to express a need to our partner? Is that happening because maybe they did something to that triggered us and we need to work through that together? Does there need to be a boundary? Was there a violation of boundaries? And so I think taking that self awareness, turning that into accountability and working through it will also give you the common themes of like, what do I need in relationships? And what can my partner do to support that? What can I change? If that is you go into shutdown mode, it's so important to be aware of that, to express to your partner what's happening, what you need, and then taking the accountability to regulate yourself through that. And so I think that part is such a huge step for any attachment wound. But then also, as we spoke to earlier, I think becoming really aware of what attachment style you're attracted to and why. What patterns is it reinforcing in your childhood? Why are you attracted to that partner? Because oftentimes, what I hear when we're really actively doing the work in therapy sessions, whether it's reprocessing trauma, wounds, and just like working really hard on getting to secure attachment, that person is doing the work. And then when it comes to dating, they're like, these relationships are so boring. They're calm. There is no drama. Does this person
Yes.
even like me? And I hear that so often where people are so used to the anxiety and the inconsistent that they're like, I don't even think this person cares about me that much because there's just such a normal like dating process and consistency and love and care and showing up. And so I think that's really important to reflect on too, that if you are dating great people, but it feels boring, it feels safe, kind of noticing why it's making your body feel that way too. And exploring what that secure attachments may be doing for you.
Yeah. When he said that, I was like, that's how I felt about Tyler. I was like, he's not playing any games. Is this
Not interested. Yeah.
normal? This feels very foreign.
Absolutely. And it truly does feel so foreign to our nervous system. And I
Yes.
think that's something we need to understand is our nervous system does not like anything that is unfamiliar. It likes the familiarity,
Yeah.
even if it's chaos and it being unsafe. And so, us having to really understand what is safe, what's happening, how do I get my body on board. But I think those books, like Attached, is a great, just like intro attachment book. And then Wired for Love is great, especially if you're an adult and you're in a romantic relationship and understanding those triggers and your own attachment. That is so helpful. But the workbook would be
Mhm.
truly such a great place to start.
Yeah, I'm hearing do the workbooks on the attachment project, which we'll obviously put in the show notes. Another thing that came to mind was like, if that's kind of maybe too much and you can't maybe quite figure out your attachment style, or maybe you just don't want to go there yet, just look at who you're dating and figure out what they are. And you're probably the opposite of what they are. Like,
Yeah.
oh man, my one's really avoidant. He likes to avoid conflict. I'm probably anxious. So that might be an easy start for you too. And then kind of just what I'm hearing, honestly, is emotional maturity just runs parallel to secure attachment and self awareness. I mean, you really cannot be emotionally mature without being securely attached. So it's almost like however you want to do the work to get to there. Like, honestly, I didn't even explore attachment styles until really up until we met. And I had
Mhm.
been doing the work for 3 years in other areas of my life to raise my emotional intelligence and security. And with that just came secure attachment. So it's not like
Yeah.
the only way that you're going to get securely attached is by directly doing attachment work, which obviously is going to help. But healing your trauma, looking at your wounds. Again, just any way you can be self aware, reading books. I've read a ton of books on trauma and self help and healing. And then that was like 3 years later, the attachment started coming up. And then it was honestly a lot easier to recognize it after I was kind of out of it. I was like, oh, I totally used to be avoidant attachment. I was living my whole life like that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. That's such a great point of like it doesn't have to be direct attachment work, but working on self-esteem and communication techniques is so helpful as well of getting really comfortable with boundaries, getting really comfortable with expressing your needs and knowing your self-worth, all things that are so so intertwined with
yes.
secure attachment.
Awesome. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add that you didn't get to say?
I just think when you were talking about like even looking at the people who you have dated, I think looking at that pattern is so helpful
Yeah.
and understanding the attachment styles because I think it builds both empathy for those individuals of why they were acting that way and gives
Mhm.
yourself so much clarity of like, oh, that wasn't me directly. That is their wounds and their characteristics that they brought forth to the table, given the plethora of things that happened in their childhood that had nothing to do with our relationship. And so I think it is helpful to understand why a disorganized acts that way and why maybe an avoidant attachment behaves that way and an anxious, because I think it sheds so much light and gives you clarity on even how to show up better for those people as well, if that's a family member, if that's a friend, to really understand, okay, like I understand that this thing I do activates them. Here's how I can show up differently, or even just let them know, like, hey, I know that's really tough for you. And I'm like here with that for you. And so I think even understanding the loved ones around you to be able to show up for them in a different way and have a little bit more understanding of, okay, that makes sense on why they're behaving that way, just also strengthens and gives secure relationships as well.
I love that. Also, it will set you free from so many things. Maybe they had said something to you
Absolutely.
and you take it very personally, and then you have to look at the mouth that it came from and why they're saying that. So that could definitely set you free from so many negative thinking or identities of yourself or beliefs about yourself, recognizing, okay, this person is this and they're saying this. Clearly, I know this isn't about me. I'm not going to attach those words to me and my identity. So absolutely. I love that. I love that you said that.
All that other than that,
Yay.
I think
Okay.
that's
Well,
it.
this
That's Your attachment.
Yes. All right. We're on the road to secure attachment. So this has been awesome. Yeah. So if you found this helpful, just be sure to check out all of our previous episodes on the attachment style to get a full picture of how they show up in our lives. Definitely recommend doing that. There's not really any order you have to listen to that because those three are just basically like an insecure all in their own box, and then secure is kind of like in its own separate box. So whichever one you are feeling more drawn to, that you might be, maybe listen to that first, or however you want to get a good sense. Also, it could be good to listen to them for other people in your life, like Morgan just said, to get a better sense of someone or people that maybe aren't doing the work or will do the work anytime soon, and you kind of want to understand them a little bit more. So we will link all the references in the show notes. And again, thank you, Morgan, for taking the time to jump on and wrap this up. And we're going to get more on a consistent schedule with more amazing topics for you guys. We already have a list going, so
Yes.
I
Thank
can't
you so much. It
wait. It's
feels
so
good
good
to
to see
be
your
back.
face. Yeah. Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.